Probably all seen it. Watch Outdoor Channel, watch cable TV, watch YouTube, and there's someone rattling in a monster buck and they go flying across the field, looking. They come in and they shoot him with a bow. Happens all the time, right? It'll happen to you, right? Maybe not. You know, we're filming this right in the middle of the peak rut. So it's a great time to rattle, right? Bucks are cruising. How about we show 2 bucks in a fight over a doe and another buck's going to come racing right in, right? Maybe. You have to be very cautious when it comes to rattling. You're trying to imitate 2 bucks fighting. And if it sounds good enough and a buck is in that mood, he's going to come in. There is a risk. There's a lot of shy bucks out there. Think about those overly aggressive bucks that come into grunt calls, rattling antlers, bleat cans, snort wheezes. If they readily come into those and they're real aggressive about it, they probably don't make it to a very old age in most of the locations we hunt because there's some form of hunting pressure. I think that's what's different when you look at some of the YouTube channels, the hunting industry shows, Outdoor Channel, whatever it might be, in that it looks so easy. You don't realize they're hunting 1,000 acres and there's no one else that hunts there, and the neighbors are 500 acres, the other neighbor's 1,200 acres, there's 800 acres down the road. All the ag is farmed by 1 farmer or 2, and there's just no one else in between. And so those bucks rarely get any kind of pressure at all. Some of those properties get hunted by 2, 3, 4 people at the most, 1,000 acres. So when they're rattling and something's running in, it really sets up a false expectation because the majority of us don't hunt that way. So I want to discuss the rut and rattling and why. I have some of my favorite rattling antlers here. These are from a shed here on the property. I mentioned before, I used to have some antlers like this that I found from a dead buck in Michigan in the 90s, and someone stole them out of a shed I had in the UP of Michigan at my home. So these are it. Perfect size, right? Look at that rut. Let's just look at that first because that's what we're in right now. Look at the pre-rut. Pre-rut is a buildup. A lot of bucks are still almost in their summer patterns. They're in their October lull patterns. It's basically food and sleep. And all of a sudden, something clicks. And I don't even think necessarily it's a doe coming into estrus most of the time. It's just that time of year. It's getting ready. Their testosterone's built up to a certain level. The velvet's off early September. And all of a sudden, it makes some more rubs and scrapes. I'm going to challenge that buck over there. We're going to spar a little bit. But they really have nothing to drop dead, drag out, fight for. This is really not, you've probably seen online where a buck is goring another buck, even a dead buck laying there, another one runs up and gores. That's pretty stinking aggressive. I've never seen that. I've seen another buck run another buck off sideways through the brush, say a 5-year-old or 6-year-old run a 3-year-old off. And then he made about 50 rubs in one spot too. He'd go by there thinking, wow, this is a buck's bedding area. This is a staging area. This is where he hangs out. No, he was just really, really ticked off and made a whole bunch of rubs. And they had a hot doe there too. That was more middle of the rut. But in the early season, just a tickle. They're just playing around, sparring a little bit. It might even get a little bit aggressive, but it's not this. Just really a lot of friction and over again with a lot of grass and leaves and branches breaking. It's not like that typically, because typically when that happens, they're fighting. It's not because they just don't like each other. They might even hang out all summer long, all spring long, and most of the winter. It's that they're fighting for a doe that's coming into estrus. Really not that much of another reason. It's not like they're fighting over their bedding area or they just get ticked off at each other, their favorite acorn tree. It's not like that. They're typically fighting over a hot doe. And one's going to win. And sometimes it's brutal. They get locked. You know how much force it'd take to lock antlers together? It's incredible. Even to get them off. I mean, 2 people go in and try to rescue these bucks. A lot of times they're sawing off the dead buck's antlers just so a live buck can stumble away. It looks like it's drunk because it's expended so much energy, not only during that fight, but then afterwards trying to survive. Then you get into the rut lockdown. Every buck has a doe. It's only a few days long. Got to ask yourself, if every buck has a doe, why are you going to produce a knockdown, drag-out fight with 2 bucks when they already all have one, especially the older bucks? They easy get one. All the bucks get one. And they even talk about that during a primary rut that an individual buck will breed 2 to 4 does during that primary rut over that 2-week period, 3-week period. And it's not necessarily so that the older bucks breed the 4 and the younger bucks breed the 2. They all participate. So when it comes down to the lockdown, every buck has one. Going back to those super shy bucks that live to be older and bigger, do you really want to have a big fight? And if you're just tickling antlers together during that time, they're not even exhibiting the same type of pre-rut behavior at that time where they're making a bunch of rubs and scrapes because they're tending does. So this normal playing around with 2 bucks, to me, it's not natural during that time. But then you get into the peak rut. And that's when a buck can be traveling from a neighbor's property. He's already bred 1 to 2 does. He's starting to look around. That, to me, is when there's some good drop-down, drag-out fights. So that's a pretty good time. At the same time, what if it's a super shy buck? What if a buck that you're trying to rattle already has a doe? He's not coming over. So it's a little bit more touch and go during that time. Get into the post-rut. This, to me, is a bunch of buddies are going to the bar and they want to meet some girls. They go to a bar and there's 30 girls there and there's only 5 of them. Well, probably pretty easy to talk to one, even for the most shyest guy. Most shy guy. He's going to go and find someone to talk to probably. But eventually, as the night wears on, more guys come to the bar. People are starting to move around. The ratio gets a little skewed. And some of those guys that, bar hopping all the time and they know this bar across town that stays open late. And they're going to go cruise over there 15 miles and go check out that bar, see whose friends are there, see if there's any girls they know there, whatever it is. That, to me, is kind of like the post-rut, where most of the rutting activity is almost done for the night or a day. But bottom line is there's still those random spots where those big boys know about, and they're going to go cruise, and they're going to try to find them. Sorry for the bar analogy. Hope that doesn't bother you. But bottom line, the point is that that's where some really, really bad fights can take place. And if there's bad fights taking place at that time between 2 old boys that are going after a little pocket of does, they don't want to give up on the rut, and there's only 10, 20% of the does even coming into estrus left at that time, man, some rattling antlers can be great. Let's go to the early season. October lull. If anything, it's just some tickling of the antlers. Just really light. Again, why are they just going at it and beating each other for it? There's really not much of a reason to. So to me, it's not as natural. The louder you are, the more deer you push away, and there's going to be those bucks. They're just not ready for that yet. The velvet just came off a little while ago. The testosterone levels aren't even as built up as normal. Their bodies aren't as big. Their necks aren't as big. It's not that they're looking at like, geez, I need to go to the gym before I approach that fight. They're just looking at like, it's just not a part of who they are yet. It's not a part of their DNA. Late season second rut. That's when all bets are off. But think about it. In your area, if there's a lot of private land, a lot of people have been using antlers, you even want to use them at that time. Bucks can be pretty call shy, no different than the end of turkey season, where turkeys have been called to over and over and over again, and they've had some encounters with people. Could be great. Again, going back to the situation, do you have high hunting pressure? One of the things, public land. I think public land, that's where I have brought antlers most recently. Because I might be rattling to a buck that was 2 miles away at daybreak from my stand position, and he's in a clear cut a half mile away, and he's just going to hear a little bit of those antlers while I'm up on the ridge. He might think, I'm going to head that way. There's not a lot of deer there, and he's just going for that social interaction just to check things out. Public land's a little bit different. But even then, I really like quieting down in the morning and the evening, maybe rattle every hour during the day, follow up with a couple grunts 15, 20 minutes later. What's the biggest risk of rattling at all is that deer get downwind of you. If they get downwind of you, which they usually do, why would you come into a fight? If you knew they could watch you while you're walking in, you'd rather come to the side. Bucks don't want to enter a fight. They want to know who's there. They want to come in on the downwind side. They want to sneak in. And typically, if you have a stand back in the timber, there's going to be room for them to sneak behind you. And unless you have your downwind blocked, I wouldn't rattle. Rattle in a nice buck at the time in the UP of Michigan. This was late 90s, early 2000s. And I rattled because I had my back up against a creek system that was very open and a lot of water. And what did he do? He came out of the brush and timber. He walked to that edge. He was not going to walk out in that water and out in the open, and he came right to me and gave me a shot with my bow. That happened a lot. A lot of times with smaller bucks, but at the same time, had some good success with that. It's just you have to know when you can rattle and get away with it, and when you can't. You have to always be wary of those super shy bucks, and those bucks they got to an older age because they're shy and they run away from confrontation. I think a lot of times those ones that run right in are going to be smaller because they're super aggressive and they don't know any better yet. So public land, you might want to use those antlers a little bit more, especially if you're hunting the vast public land that we do where they don't see a lot of people. And then number 5 here, when it comes to rattling antlers, for a lot of you, it's a never mind type thing. And I'm not saying to not go try it and use it, but you can really ruin a hunt by using some antlers. And think of a time our neighbor in Wisconsin, down where we used to hunt about 8 years ago, somewhere around there, 10 years ago, whatever it was, 2016, 17, right around there. Because Dylan was there in those. Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez.
Where'd that time go?
Where's it go?
And I don't know if we had hunted the year before you were there. Maybe. Not sure. Yeah. Might have been a 2015 thing, even 14. And then you were coming in on year 3 or 2. But bottom line is, we were there, and in our last year, I was hunting up top in a location next to a big farm, and all of a sudden I deer out in front of me on a food plot, and it was a nice night, one of those rut nights, and all of a sudden you hear some rattling take place. Snort wheeze, grunt call, can bleat, and this hunter was throwing the whole kitchen sink at the deer herd. Must have seen a monster buck. We have deer running at us. They congregated in front of us looking back at him, and he had to be 250 yards away and along the open field. So we could hear pretty well, couldn't see the hunter, but man, he was spooking a lot of deer. We heard the big diesel truck come in and drop him off while we were already sitting, and then leave, and then come back and pick him up after dark. The bottom line is, that was a case where when you overcall deer, a lot of times they just tuck tail and run the other way. It always pays when you're calling deer, whether you're using antlers or anything else, to be conservative. And I'm not saying using a snort wheeze is conservative, but even then there's a right time and a right place. Shot a nice buck in Kentucky a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was the last night I was there, and this buck came through growling, obviously being very aggressive. He was my target buck, so I'm about 100 to 125 yards away, somewhere around there. He's coming through. There's a chance he could circle and get around me and come in for a shot. And so I took the conservative approach and didn't snort wheeze back, just sat real nasally, just blowing into your hand. That's all it takes. I didn't do it because I didn't want to spook him. There was a chance. We ended up hunting another night. And after that hunt, before we had decided to stay one more day, I'm like, man, maybe I should have tried. But you can't ever second guess yourself. I made a good decision for the right reasons. You just move forward. The next night, though, when I went in there, if he did that same thing, because he didn't come to me, then I would have snort wheezed at him if he did the same thing. But instead, he came right to me and I shot him and killed him. So that's the end of that story. But bottom line is, that is even a tactic like snort wheezing, no different than using a grunt call, using rattle antlers. You need to know when to say when calling deer. And that's something you can live by. And when it comes to it, maybe you just never mind. You just never use it in the first place. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. You're our best followers. You followed all the way to the end of the video. Really invite you to check out our website. We have our earthway spreaders for sale. Great Christmas presents. We're booking clients right now, all 5 of us. So by the end of December, it seems early, but by the end of December, our schedule will be booked for 2025. It's hard to believe. I'm already booked for December and most of January, February. We have our web classes, the rut web class, how to design your whitetail property, and really important, hunting hills and thermals, understanding the wind. Those are great products on our site, all the books. Thank you so much for watching all the videos, buying the seed that you did this year. Really appreciate you.